What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Ruben and Jessie podcast. As always, I am Jessie.
And I'm Ruben.
And if this is your first time, this won't be your last. And if you are back again, well, we are happy to have you. What is going on, Ruben? How are you feeling today?
Enjoying this beautiful weather here in Northern California, which is going through a drought right now. But the weather, at least in where I'm at in the Bay, has been like a steady 70 to 75 every day. It's like perfect. But we definitely need some rain out here. Need some water.
Water. Yeah, man. Yeah. I mean, how bad is this drought? What's going on?
I'm hearing it's pretty bad based on like all the news. Like a lot of the West Coast is experiencing some of the highest on record heat, like in Seattle and Oregon, mostly on the Pacific Northwest, which you don't normally get that. I mean, you're talking about Seattle, it like rains like 80% of the time or some craziness like that. And folks, I'm talking about it's June 29th. That can obviously change by the time this episode comes out. But global warming is it's something. I mean, it's a natural aspect of the world and like how it shifts, but it's definitely affecting our water supply and all those things. So
yeah. So, but are your sinks working?
Yeah, all that is good, but we got to be prepared for anything. So even though we're moving,
are you stacked up on water?
Not right now because we're moving, but once we move, I was like, get stocked on water. Get a generator if that's required, things of that sort.
Some preparation.
Yes, got to make sure we prepare for if anything
all
happens.
Right.
But anyway.
All right. Well, anyway.
What are we talking about,
we'll
Jesse?
We'll worry about that later.
We'll worry about that later. Life continues.
We're talking about some goodness. As always, we've got another series for you. Today, we're going to talk about what we consider to be sort of the four pillars of life, and those being relationships, career / wealth, health, and spirituality, and part of that being religion as well. So these are obviously, universal topics, things on people's minds throughout their entire lives, obviously on our minds, especially since this is our area of wonder, curiosity, and what we want to share with the world. And we kind of we figured it'd be fun to talk about when we started on our journey to think, like when we first became conscious of these ideas or these categories, how we felt about them when we launched into them versus how we feel about them today. And this is actually going to be really fun because I'll be curious, in 10 years from now, when we look back at this episode, to be like, how much did we keep from how we feel about it today to how much did we choose to change or shift? So it's going to be fun. We're going to tackle each episode, 4 episodes. And today we are going to start with relationships, and relationships being twofold, being relationships in friendships, family, platonic love, and then the not so platonic love of spouses and partners and lovers and things of that nature. So let's jump right in, brother. Let's kick off with relationships when it comes to well, let's just start off with like what we thought relationships meant in a general sense, and actually we could start with what it meant to outside of a partner and a lover, because obviously that can be somewhat different, or at least maybe it's more of the same now than it was before. So let's start with you, man. When you thought about your friendships and your family and just like how you related to others, what were your ideas about what it meant and what was right, what was wrong when you first started on the journey of like improving yourself and being conscious of how you related to others?
Yeah. Um, the first thing that comes to mind is obviously what happens when you're growing up. Like, what do you learn from your parents, and like how you show up in your relationships is really how you show up with them. And something I learned from single mother household was this whole idea of this for that, like this for that. Like, I do this because I want this person to do this. Like, that reciprocity, while does exist, my mother definitely had a very difficult time being more of a giver, but with the expectation that that person needed to do something when she asked, when that wasn't always the case. So when I was getting into like being aware of these things and noticing in my teen years, in high school and with my friendships, was really that, like, if I did something for somebody, I made sure that they were to do it for me as well. But I was also much more selfish back then, that when people did do things for me, I wouldn't really reciprocate, because I will feel either I didn't have enough to provide them with, like whatever that was. Like, I was the type to say no when they bought me things. Um, but I thought it was just like, that's how you reciprocate. Like, if Jesse buys me lunch today, I have to get him back tomorrow or sometime this week, or else it's gonna bother me a lot, because that's kind of like what I grew into. So when I have friends, and I in high school I had a mixture of friends, who would, I had one of my best friends at the time. He was very much a giver. Like, he was the one to buy the bottle for the crew, and be like, don't, no, don't give me money back. Like, I always respected that, because I was like, I will never be that person. At least that's what I thought at
Mm,
that given time. I would never be that person to walk with into the group with a bottle in hand for us to all enjoy and drink together, and whatever the case may be. Because one, I had a scarcity mindset. Like, I can't afford that. Like, I'm gonna ask everyone for their money back. Like, you know what I mean? At the time. So, like, when it came to that, I was always like, I'm not that person. I'm not the giver. If anything, I look back now, I was probably more of a taker, because I would be in these circles and not provide the dollar amount. I would try to like be sneaky about it and make sure maybe they forgot that we're all chipping in for this, and maybe I can get away with not giving money because I don't have a lot of it. So it was always like that. And definitely looking back, it seems pretty bad to think that way. And if any of those old friends are listening, like, I'm truly sorry. I was in a different space and different time, because I don't view things that way. Like, if I'm gonna buy Jesse, if Jesse buys me lunch with no expectations of me buying him lunch, I'm still gonna get it for him, but I'm not gonna have an expectation that he needs to provide me the money back, or whatever the case may be. Yeah, one day I was
mhm,
like, you're gonna Venmo me the money back in the day, but now I'm at a place where it's like, no, I live abundantly. Like, I don't need to do that. If he decides to reciprocate, amazing. But we already created a relationship where that doesn't fucking matter. Like, we're beyond that. You know what I mean?
mhm,
That was
mhm,
definitely more superficial, I would say, back then than I am today. So,
mm.
and same goes for family. It's two in the same.
Yeah, I think for me, before I became like before I even chose to work on my relationships, because I feel like it seems like that's more of where we're starting based on what you just shared, is like
Hmm.
even before the books or
Way before.
any of that stuff, before putting intention into anything. um
Ice
I
cream man.
def
No, I'm kidding.
I was wondering if you heard that. Yeah, that's great that that's part of that. um I definitely found myself, uh I was a very trustworthy kid, meaning I would put my trust into people very like
Mm.
willingly, to the point where my mother was like concerned about it. like, because I was so just like open, you know, and would let people into my life, assuming the best of them, even though they weren't necessarily the best. You know what I mean? And I think when I was younger, part of that had to do with the fact that like I just obviously wanted to be liked. You know, I just wanted friendship. And I just assumed that because I would go into things with good intentions, I would assume that others would too. And that wasn't necessarily always the case. And so, and that honestly happened for a long time. Like it took me probably into my 20s, like into like maybe late teens, 19, 20, 21, to really start having discretion with what I shared and how I shared it. And even now, like I feel like it's even I guess now it just becomes more and more subtle, you know, but if you continue to put the awareness on it, you see it. But is having that discretion and like taking my time with the developing relationships. Whereas when I was younger, I think it was just like, oh yeah, like let's just share everything. You know, let me just put everything on the table so you know me and I know you. I think I also used to have this very strong expectation of, and I think I got this a lot from my parents, because they, you know, they would, this was a problem they would have, where it was like they would set these strong expectations of people in their lives to be a certain way or to have to show up a certain way. And for that, they would never sustain friendships because they didn't, from my understanding, they didn't really accept people for who they were. They expected people to be what they were to them. So if like similarly to what you're saying, like if my mom or dad was a certain way to another person, they would expect the same in return, and they wouldn't have patience if that wouldn't show up. So they would just be like, oh, this isn't my person, and end up not having friendships long term because they would go away. And I found myself, you know, becoming more and more like that, you know, as a teenager, where it was like I would expect my friends to like always be around, you know, or like, you know, if they went somewhere and didn't invite me, I would feel like that was a personal attack, you know, of like, oh, they don't fuck with me, or they're hiding things from me, blah 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 blah. Because I would, you know, if I had an invitation to go somewhere, I would do my best to make all my friends go. Only realizing that not necessarily that I always want to do that, you know, but I did it because I felt like a responsibility, and then, you know, I expanded that responsibility onto other people to do the same. And I think those are kind of the main things, you know. And I literally just thought like a friendship was, and it still is, it really can be this simple sometimes, but to me it was just like, oh, we have fun and we have each other's backs. And if that's all that there is, then that's good enough. And I think that was sort of the cap on what excited me, was just like that we had a good time in that. And honestly, like I think especially as a teenager, I became very oriented with what does this person have to offer me.
Right.
So it was
Same.
like, how do I, like, oh, this person has a connection to these girls, or this person has a connection to this group, and they go to these parties. So I don't care so much about the person, right, and their values or who they are. I care more about what they are an instrument towards or a bridge towards. So I would just want to hang out with certain people because it allowed me to be exposed to other groups of people, or it allowed me to have a certain persona because I was spending time with this person. Not really, and not, not setting the frame from the perspective of like, well, what do I want this experience to be? But
Right.
more of like, what experience can I gain from being with this person? And I think I did that for many years. And even now, it can show up subtly, even though now it's more like I'm doing that in business, and it's like we're aware that this is a mutual exchange of like
Right.
networking. That's where networking plays in, where it's like we both know why we're here, and we're both trying to get ahead in our own perspective reality. So that's why we're exchanging. But I think when I was younger, I was definitely a lot more sneaky about it. And actually, I would, if I was to boil it down, I think that would be it. Is like, I saw relationships as, how does this enhance my persona?
Right.
How does
100%.
how does having these friends enhance the way I am perceived by others? I think a huge part of it was that, for sure.
100%. And I think, like, as you were speaking, the same was coming up. Like, what does this person have to offer? Like, will they get me into, especially when I, like, broke up with my ex, the emotional abusive relationship, and started like meeting new friends, and like, maybe we could have a whole podcast on like my life in the game, and like going out weekly, and because that's like a whole journey in and of itself. But like, really, when I started getting into that world, and the guys I used to hang out with was literally just for that. Like, this guy gets girls, I'm going to hang out with him as much as possible because I need to learn from him. It was all about it wasn't what I can provide him in terms, he had the status. So I was like, just another girl at the time, going and following him around, trying to get these things from him. And that was only one guy. I'm just using that as an example. There were multiple men that I just followed around for no other reason than to learn these things from them without reciprocating anything on my end. And that was 2 years, like, straight up of just that. Like, I would never talk to this group of men that I had befriended. We never talked about anything outside of just that. Like, we went out together. The only times we talk is like, yo, you going out tonight? Where are you going? Oh, you going to LES, Lower East Side? Going to Midtown? Or you going to St. Mark's? Like, I'm talking about New York City.
St. Mark's, bro.
But like, that was all the conversation. And I'm like, again, superficial. Like, that's all we never dug into the shit that we talk about, even just on the podcast. I'm not even talking about the shit we talk about outside of the podcast. Like, outside of the podcast, we go way deeper. And it's like, we never had those conversations. I never had these conversations with a guy. It was just about, drinking, having a good time, which I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but at the time in my life, it's like, that's all I was looking for, which is why those relationships never sustained, because they had an expiration date. Just like my high school friends, there was an expiration date because of this idea of values, which is what came up while you were talking. It's like, that's the overarching thing. Like, now it's about like, we have similar values. We're here to help each other grow, and we're taking each other on this journey called life, and we're doing it together. Which I don't know if you have anything else to say, because that kind of bridges on into like intimate relationships and the partner you decide to be with. So I don't know if you have anything else to.
No, what's coming up is, it feels like what we're actually going to do here is 3 stages. So it's like what it was when we were unconscious, what it was when we became conscious, and what it was like up to this level of consciousness, where we are today. So yeah, we can talk about, we can, move into what it was like being in intimate relationships unconsciously, without the intention of an awareness of anything. Because boy, I cannot tell you a bad day.
Both of us. I mean, when you're unconscious, where you're getting your knowledge from? Media, maybe your friends, maybe your parents, and like other family members that you see. Like, at least that's what it was for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so sick of love songs. as the man once said.
Sick of
So
you talking about Neo, right?
yeah, yeah.
That's the man right there.
That's the man. So yeah, so let's go. Let's hear the backstory, brother.
Yeah, I mean, you going into I'm going as I was growing up, single mother. So I really never grew up. Not only my mom, so my grandmother had 13 children, like
Mm,
to everyone
damn.
listening. My grandmother and
Let's
my
go.
grandfather got busy. You know what I'm saying? They have no
How
TV
long?
in Puerto Rico. They were getting busy and they had nothing else to do. They had 13 kids, okay? Seven girls, six boys. And the majority of them moved up here, with the exception of two of the children, moved up here to New York, while one of my uncles and one of my aunts stayed in Puerto Rico. Um,
Mm,
and my mother was the youngest of the 13. My grandmother died when my mother was actually 13.
wow.
So I never even got to meet her, and I think my grandfather died not too long after. So again, I wasn't even born or thought of yet. So my mom and my father just had like a one night thing. I was created in that little bit, that love making session of once, um, which my mom being single, 20 years old, living with an aunt who also had children from a man who wasn't around. So I was around a lot of women that weren't around other men. So I had no way of looking at what a successful relationship, intimate relationship looks like. I didn't have any of that, you know. One of my aunts did, but he worked nights. So when I went to her
Mm,
house, he was always sleeping because he had to work
mm,
at night. So I really only got to see him when he would wake up, get ready for work, and do all those things. So I never really got to connect to that, right? My uncles are
mm-hmm,
kind of like doing their own thing as well. Also like kind of like in and out of relationships. They will bring a woman with them sometimes, sometimes not. So I never really got to see any of that. So a lot of what I learned was through media, through movies,
mm-hmm,
through songs, right? You brought up Neo, like all those R&B songs. Like I was a big R&B head. Like I used to listen to all of that. So I learned all my relationship stuff from that. So
mm-hmm,
going into like, my first relationship, my first serious relationship was just like, it was literally built on a lie. Like I fucking
mm,
lied to the I met this girl through a girl that I was kind of about to start seeing, but her friend kind of beat her to the punch, if that makes sense, right? So it was like this trifecta thing going on for a little bit. And then like the girl I ended up dating was best friends with the girl that I was like kind of almost there with, but she kind of was taking her time or like not hinting at my little flirtatious remarks. So my ex ended up winning. We hit it for like 3 months and then kind of blew up in our faces. They ended up not being friends anymore. This girl ended up never talking to me again. And we kind of built on that, right? So, first of all, already starting off in the wrong foot. Like, it's just bad. And I just didn't know what I was doing. Both of us didn't know what we were doing. So our relationship was built on one aspect, and that was sex. I mean, literally, that's all we did for that year and change that we were together. It's just like every time we saw each other, it was like that was the thing to do. We're like bunny rabbits, we're 15 years old. Like, what else do you expect? And we
yes.
never had the deep intimacy that's not sexual, like the intimate parts of a relationship. We didn't have any of that. It was just like, I'm here, we do the thing, and then we sit and watch movies. Like there was no discussion, no talking. If we talked about anything, it was just like school bullshit, drama, gossip, like what happened on this show that we're watching together but separately, like just whatever. Even when she would come to my house, bro, like I would just sit and play video games the whole time and she would just watch me. That was it.
Wow.
That was like the extent of our relationship at 15. Like there was
Mm-hmm,
nothing going on there because I had never learned, and I'm sure she didn't either because her father was kind of out of the picture. Again, like bringing up fathers out of the picture, that cannot happen anymore. Like, and I mean,
mm-hmm,
we've had podcasts on men's stuff, but it's like the consistencies, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
it was just a lot of like pain and heartache. You think like jealousy because that's what I saw in movies. So that's something you're supposed to do. If another guy is talking to her, you're supposed to get pissed off. Like all these things that I had learned from movies and trying to be this Top Gun, Tom Cruise-ish kind of guy, or like a Brad Pitt from Fight Club kind of guy at the time, which when you think about in hindsight are like completely not the right ways to being a man, right? Like it's just
And even
that's
those guys aren't really like that, even
exactly.
those men aren't even like
They're
that,
just
in real
characters.
life. Yeah,
They're just playing a
exactly.
character. So I didn't know that. I was just like, this is how you're supposed to be. It's all over the media. This is what it is. And like I'm supposed to do these grand gestures, like buy them
Yeah.
gifts and all that shit. So that's where that unconsciousness was showing itself for my first two relationships, because the second one was very much the same as the first. And the second one only lasted less than a year. But it was exactly the same. Like just sex, come over, me play video games. Maybe occasionally we go out with friends, we gossip, we talk about drama, and that's pretty much our relationship. So
Yeah.
that's my unconscious part. And then obviously when I get into the emotionally abusive relationship was when things started to shift a lot. But before I get there, I definitely want to hear from your side of the unconscious part.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, obviously there are a lot of parallels, I think, from what you shared to me, but the angle I want to approach it from that comes up is like when I was a kid, there was so much emphasis around the approval of girls in school, so it was like, and not just in school, but on TV, in movies, cheerleaders and jocks. Like this was, even though that didn't even exist in elementary school, like that was in the mentality. Or like these raving superstars of music, like musicians, Justin Bieber and all these like characters like that, so it was like or Jesse McCartney, if you guys
My
remember
God, that's
that guy.
Karina's favorite. She loves that dude.
Really?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Yeah, Justin McCartney. So um and especially when I was in elementary, like kids are savages, you know what I mean? Like kids are such savages, at least they were. I don't know how they are now. My assumption is kids are nicer now, but
What? With social media, they're meaner.
I don't know.
I have a little
know
brother. I
what's going
hear all
on.
this shit, bro. So it's pretty bad out there right now.
Well, hopefully that changes. But it does as you get older. But when I was in elementary school, it's like, I would say elementary, and at least for me, it was elementary and middle school, where it was like the superficiality, you as a person are not particularly always like interested in the depth of another person when you're fucking 11 years old or 10 years old, right? You're just seeing what you're seeing and basing your assumptions by the narrative that has been sold to you, So it was like when I was young, when I was a kid, I was a chubby kid, mop hair, and girls were not particularly interested, and who were they interested in? The athletic kids, skinny kids, whatever it was. And not a problem. I totally I get it, but I remember, I just remember going through that experience and being like, and it started to change in middle school. I'm not gonna lie, like 7th grade, 8th grade, I started coming into my personality, and I think the girls were maturing as well. So there was already starting to be more of an energetic exchange than a physical, just appearance exchange. And I remember this because as a youth, I was so invalidated by girls, and also invalidated by guys, because it was like, I was getting bullied a lot. I had to stand up for myself a lot, this whole thing. And I was always like, I was always a bit of a lover boy, um, and like if I liked a girl, like I really liked the girl, you know what I mean? And I didn't know how to hide it either. That was the thing. Like I couldn't hide if I liked you. And to this
Were
day,
you the
that's still
kid
like
that
a
bought the
real.
rose on Valentine's Day to send to her in her classroom and whatnot? Because I know I
I
did.
definitely wrote poem. I would definitely wrote poems for girls. I would write poems for girls. I would like write letters to girls. Or sometimes I would literally just like go up to them and just get denied, like hardcore.
No wonder you're so good at taking no.
Oh man, fuck. But it was really like I couldn't hide it, like if I was interested in you, it was really hard. I think there were maybe one or two girls that were just like really tough girls that I liked. That I was just like, man, I'm too afraid of you to tell you that I like you because you're gonna eat me. So I don't want that to happen. Um, uh, and so I think as I got older and became a teenager, and even like preteen, once I started having some success with relating to women and even relating to people, where I was still a chubby kid, but my personality was starting to shine through so much that that wasn't that my physicality would fade away because of who I was showing up as a kid, as a person. And so it became where it was like I had this adoration for women, and that my sense of relating with them was like, oh, if a girl gave me the time of day, that means she accepts me for who I am. You know what I mean? Like if she gave me time, that meant that like, wow, she gets me. Like it was to that extent, It's like, wow, she really understands me. She's really like cool, just because she wanted to give me time, or she found me attractive, whatever it was. And then I think as I got into high school, you know, um, the first girl I dated when I was like 14, um, that was psychosis, because it was literally like I was so I don't want to use the word overprotective, because there was nothing to protect. I was just like delusional in my sense of like what it meant to be with another, with a partner. And I had such insecurity within myself that like something bad would happen, or that I wasn't enough, that I was like, if she was talking to another guy, that it meant that something had to happen, you know what I mean? um uh and I was just so afraid of being a fool or being embarrassed, that I was just crazy, and wanted to, be on top of her for everything she was doing. And I took everything she said like so to heart, because to me, it was very much like, once I was in a relationship at the time, it became very much of like, oh, all my expectations should be met as far as who we are together. And if any of that ever doesn't get met, then you're treating me like shit or whatever, so that's how I approached it. And if you didn't want to spend all your time with me, then that was also like, what the fuck, like what's going on, who are you with, or why do you want to spend time with these other people? It was really intense. I've shared this story before, where it was like, I remember she came to school with a Justin Bieber t-shirt on, and I didn't talk to her for the rest of the day, because I was like, how could
Okay,
you,
shit like that.
yeah, how could you be in a relationship with me and fucking,
Love Justin
wear
Bieber.
this, just I love Justin Bieber. And I literally didn't talk to her for an entire day. And the drama, like we would have so much drama back and forth, it was banana pants. So there was that. There was all, and then on the other side, it was like when I wasn't in a relationship, right? When it wasn't like we are in a thing, it was very, and this happened for like like this happened for a while where I was what they would call a player in the sense of like, but in the sense, not in like, because I actually don't like that term, you know, and when women have referred me to that as I got older, I was like, I'm not a player, because what I believe a player is someone who is deceptive, you know.
Yep.
And as I got older, it was like I may have been seeing different women, but I wasn't deceiving any of them. Whereas like when I was younger, I was absolutely deceiving girls. I was, you know, I would tell them all the niceties.
Yep.
I would tell them you know, all the sweet tangs to, you know, make it feel good and wholesome and lovely. And then meanwhile, I'm talking to, you know, ex other girls. And sometimes I'll be talking to one of their friends, like just not giving a fuck, you know? And to me at that point, it was really just like I was so and I would say porn has to do with this, movies had to do with this, music had to do with this, like obviously, and it impacted my guy friends, so we all thought this way, where it was really like oh, she is physically of this quality and this stature, you must do something, you know, you must approach her. Not really getting to understand who they were as people, not really getting to understand whether it was a good fit or how my actions impacted her. It was really about me and my wants and my needs and just my desire to be like sexually satiated as a teenager, that I would, you know, I would just do whatever it took to get into a girl's pants, you know. And with consent, of course, but I would take, you know, I would do whatever it took. And but honestly, even when like part of me saying that is to also say, like, just because someone gives you consent doesn't mean they have intent. And so it's like because at time, like, because I've heard women share this as I got older, and it makes me think back and like, have I put women in this situation where it's like they'll say yes, even though they may not necessarily know if they, yeah, they may not necessarily know if they wanted to or not. They just felt like, you know, like they just felt like it was what they were supposed to do, or you know, maybe they wanted to, you know, sensually maybe they wanted to, but in their mind or in their heart maybe they didn't want to, and they just felt pressured to go with it, you know, because I was persistent or because of the heat of the moment, instead of like actually checking in and being like, hey, are we on the same page as this? And then the last piece before the consciousness came into play was my 2-year relationship in high school, like you said, like similar to you, which was, you know, we started dating when we were 15 all the way until we were like 17. And it was very much the same, where we actually were really good friends before we started dating. And which was nice. But then, you know, obviously the jealousy wasn't so much of a thing there. It was more of like control. A lot of that I would say for both of us was wanting to control each other and wanting to control how we acted and how we behaved. And I would take a lot of responsibility, especially because while I was with her, it was around that time that I started really getting into personal development. And I just wanted her to change so bad that, like, oh man, I was ruthless. You know, I was ruthless in how I approached it and what I expected of her and wanted of her. And near the end, like, honestly, you know, we dated for 2 years, and a year and a half in, I already knew it was done. It was done. I mean, 6 months of knowing that this relationship was already over, that it no longer needed to be, you know, bro, but I don't know how to communicate that. You know, I didn't know how to say that. And I was also just like, I think part of me, you know, I mean, yeah, like at the end of the day, it's just that I didn't know how to communicate my emotions, my feelings, how to express them, or take responsibility for them. So it just became this ever slow burn of fight after fight, like blackout, yelling at each other, going crazy. And you know, it was also nuts. like similarly, a lot of what we did was we would go over each other's houses and just have sex, and just be sexual. Um, uh, and like in some ways, I look back at those days as like some of the most fun times because it was so easy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we didn't have to do shit. Like we knew it was the weekend, or we knew we were cutting class, like whatever it was. Like we just knew that we were gonna go to each other's
Yep.
houses,
No one's home.
fucking chill, like just chill for hours,
Yep.
bro. Just chill for hours, like chill, watch some TV. At some point, we'd get in the mood, fuck around, and then just chill, watch some more TV. 2 hours later, be like horny again, and, fuck around,
Seriously.
and then go home or
Go
stay
home
over, like
midnight.
whatever go home, and then just be like, all right, I'll see you, I'll see you tomorrow or some shit, But the thing was like, there was not a lot of, genuine thoughts and communication and interests. It was very superficial. It was definitely about like the drama that was going on in school and all that shit. I mean, we had a lot of fun. Like I'm not gonna lie, we had a lot of fun with each other. But and then whenever either of us had a problem, it was like the sarcasm was through the fucking roof. It was like and the passive aggressiveness, boy, was so strong. The passive aggression was so strong. And I just remember just the blackout fighting and going crazy. And then even when I finally had the balls to break up with her, because I just knew like that ended in an explosion. And to this day, we don't talk, unfortunately we don't talk. But so that was, once that relationship ended, I was already starting to get into personal development. And the end of that relationship obviously made me want to now start seeking out, okay, how do I actually act in relationships? So that was the turning point for me.
So crazy how that kind of boils down into, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So
all right,
it makes me
go ahead.
It makes me think, like, and this is going to lead into the conscious part of my own, like, I call it the turning point relationship. And I want to preface, I don't know if she listens to this, right? Like, but I want to preface that, I'm super grateful for this girl coming into my life. As horrible as that I say this relationship was, it was supposed to happen for all the right reasons. Like,
yeah,
she was supposed to be there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
For me to even think about moving to the next step in my journey to being conscious and understanding everything, because she was younger than me, one. Two, we, again, like, all my relationships at this time all started from not the best place. Like, there was someone hurt in the process. Again, like, being unconscious, you don't think of outside forces. Like, and it's so bad. She had a boyfriend. I had a girlfriend when we met. We worked together in my first job, which was a supermarket. We worked together.
Hey, humble beginnings, baby.
Humble beginning. We fucking like flirted like crazy. Again, sarcasm out the ass. But we would hang out and like get really close to doing things together, and just like kind of like she would like push me off or whatever the case may be. And then, one day I remember going like to my ex at the time, we end up like breaking up. It's not mutual. It's just like, it just happens. And the next day I'm like, I broke up with her. What's up? She still had her boyfriend. She's like, I'm not gonna break up with him. I was just like, okay, if you say so. Granted, about a week or two later, she breaks up with him, and we just jump right into it. And throughout those 2 years, you had someone who had her own. Obviously, I have my own pains, right, and traumas and all these things that exist, which we've discussed a few times already on this podcast. But she also had her own traumas, which I'm not going to share here because that's her story, right? she had her own traumas that she shared with me that was just like, oh, that's some dark shit. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
know, but at the time I didn't know how to deal with that. I was a young 18-year-old boy who just wanted to have sex all the time. Like that's all I cared
Yeah,
about.
bro.
You know, and
Absolutely.
it's fucking unfortunate that I think about it. And I was just like, man, that girl was in so much pain. But you know, we were in this relationship, and same thing. Like she'll come over, we do our thing, play games, gossip, bullshit, argue, like all the time. Like that was just our relationship. And there came a point where I remember I was in just in the darkest spot in my life. I mean, we were in the dumps, like just like you 6 months before. Like I saw it coming, but I just didn't know how to make it happen. And I was afraid to do it because I was scared she might do something, whether that's hurt herself or hurt me. You know what I mean? Like it got to
Mm,
that point. Um, and and you know, family wise, we were in a bad space where I was living, financially just horrible. Like everything under the sun was horrible. And I remember like just we had our like breaking point argument, and I blacked out, and I come to be, and I just like that was the first time I asked myself, why do I do this? Or why do I put myself in these
mm,
situations? Like that was the first time I'm like bawling, crying
mm.
in my little makeshift room that was created because I was tired of sharing a room with my sister. I'll never forget this. I was like, I just had turned 21, and I'm like, this life sucks. I think that was the first time I like
Mm.
contemplated suicide. Like all those things started to
Damn.
boil in. It was like again a boiling point. And you know, I finally got the balls to be like, we can't do this anymore, and
Mm-hmm.
just go from there. And just like, I can't. It was a big bad fight, and then I was just like, I'm done. Stop picking up her calls, blocked her number. You know, we met in person. I was just like, this is done. I can't do this anymore. Like the whole nine. And I remember, like literally a few days later, a coworker of mine, I was working at Best Buy at the time. I had just changed my job. He comes to me. He's like, hey, he's doing the MLM stuff, but I could say multi-level marketing changed my life in all the right ways. Like
Yo,
I don't
me.
recommend it for people, but I was in a bad space, and it really did help me get out of this gutter, because he he obviously invited me over to do one of those presentations for one of these
Yes.
big organizations. And when I was there with him, and I guess he invited some few other friends and whatever. And I connected with one of the other guys that were there. And the guy and me were just talking, and he started to talk about game. That was my first instance into like game, like Neil Strauss, all the I forget all the famous
Mm,
people that came out of that community. He tells me like three books I should read. One of them is obviously Neil Strauss, The Game. He tells me I should read The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. And then he tells me to read a financial book called The Millionaire's Fast Lane. Three book recommendations. Immediately went to Barnes and Nobles the next day and got all three. And I started with The Game because it was the most interesting to me at the time, right? It was like Secret Society of Pickup Artists. I was like, ooh, this secret society, you know what I mean? I devoured that book three times in a row, like from front to back. Like I read it,
mm,
and then I read it again, and then like highlighted the second time, and then I read it the third time with my highlights there, and just being like, I'm totally gonna get into this. But that was my first foray into like, you know, awakening my mind to like, oh, we can think about things, we can actually shift and control the things that the way we act. So these ways of me acting just don't work, and I can see why. Right, I can see why this doesn't work anymore for me, because I'm being, you know, at the time I was like, I'm being a beta male, and like I'm being a little
mm,
bitch, and like yada yada yada, that they teach you. um
mm,
I started following RSD, and like the consciousness started to grow. Like, yeah, a lot of people may diss these companies, but to be honest, they really help a lot of young men, you know, like
yeah.
there's no bad or good. Like there's just, you can only learn. And yes, these organizations made a lot of mistakes, treated women horribly. Sometimes, not all the time. It depends on the certain instructor. But I thought it was it was amazing for me and a lot of the other men that I was with. That was the first
Mm,
time I met men that were actually like talking about these things. Hey, I read this book and this is what I learned about how to show up. And
mhm.
that's how I got access to the way of superior man, which blew my mind when I read it. I was just like, what? Like I've been wrong this whole time. And then, started treating girls and like as you said, I used to lie and be deceptive to women that I was dating at the time. But reading things like The Way of the Superior Man and all the other books I was reading at the time on relationships and all that was like I need to be just honest. And if she has to go, she goes. You know what I mean? Like, but she's gonna be understanding, like this is where I'm at in my life. Not looking for anything serious, just for fun. If you want to have fun, cool, you can chill. If you don't want to have fun, we can stay friends. I don't, it's up to you really. But this is where I'm at, and just being honest and leaving it like her decision there. Um, and that's when my consciousness really started to flourish and grow. And obviously, through that growth, I was able to meet Karina at a time when I was like, I don't want a girlfriend right now, but she had those specific aspects I was actually looking for in a woman. And that's where really the growth really started to, I started to really dig into like relationship books and really learn about that, um on the relationship side of things. I know I didn't talk about the family, but obviously the way you do one thing is the way you do everything, right? So I started to be more conscious of the relationships I was bringing into my life. I started to be more conscious on how I showed up to my family, what we talked about, and like just, give them things to think about. Like, have you thought of this? Or like, have you thought of that? Why do you still think that same way? And all these other ways of being that just was because I was devouring RSD videos all the time. I was
Yeah.
devouring those videos all the time and reading all these books, that were just recommended through watching those RSD videos, honestly. But yeah, I would say, not to continue going to the same point, but that's just how I was able to flourish in my own
Mm.
conscious development when it came to my relationships.
Yeah, for me, I mean, that relationship that I mentioned was definitely that catalyst for me, like I said before, which was like coming out of that, you know, I knew that it was bad. Like when it ended, I knew it was bad. And I didn't like that at all.
Mm.
And what was crazy was like, I wasn't even, honestly, when I look back, I wasn't consciously looking for information on how to be a better partner. But what would happen is I would be reading books on personal development, mindset, relating to others, um, learning about communication skills. And because this girl was so like present in a lot of my communication opportunities, as to say, I would relate so much of my behavior to how it showed up with this girl. And especially when I read like Way of the Superior Man. Like,
Mm.
bro, when I read that book, man, it fucked me up because I was like, damn, like, fuck, like, what the fuck? You know what I mean? Like when I look back at because the the thing that sucked was like when you only have one reference point, it's like
Mm-hmm.
you're constantly. I constantly started to beat myself up. Sorry, I constantly started to beat myself up about my behavior in that relationship because I was seeing, I was learning all these things that I didn't know and was like, fuck, I definitely did that or that wrong, that wrong, that wrong, that wrong, and this is why this happened. Um, and, it took me a while to really forgive myself
Mm.
over that, and acknowledge that it was a two-way street. Um, and I remember what's it called? I remember coming out of that just being at the same time, like while I was getting into personal development, I was gaining a lot of confidence in myself.
Mm.
And, because, I finally cut my hair. I bought this like corduroy denim jacket that was looking fly, and I was starting to like communicate. Like I started to learn how to relate to people in a different way, and have my own thoughts. I think that was a really cool thing that started to occur, was like, because I was getting into personal development, I was thinking about things that my peers weren't thinking about. And so I started to have these new peers that were showing up in my books. You know what I mean? It was like my source of my reality wasn't coming from the same place everyone around me was. I had this new sources of reality that other people didn't have. So now I was coming into experiences like, they used to call me a philosopher when I was in high school, because I would philosophize about fucking everything. You know what I mean? Because it was all new to me. This was all such new ideas and topics. And everyone in my high school, at least the people I was around, they were still interested in the same old shit. Music, drama, partying, fucking all this stuff. And don't get me wrong, I was still very much interested in like, who was I getting in the pants of. But I remember like, this is where I started to change from being a quote unquote player to like being so straightforward with every woman that I was coming in contact with, and setting the stage of like, this isn't anything serious, like let's just have a good time. And if they wanted anything serious, it's like, no, we're not going to do that, and that, that trajectory lasted for a long time. I also started getting into game more, started going out, getting better at getting better at social, like meeting strangers. Like, how do I, like, because obviously you're in school, you're meeting people, you're meeting people of people, versus here it was like I was learning how to go out and just meet people on the street, and especially when you're underage and you're meeting girls who are in their 20s, which is so funny to me, because I'm like, now at 24, if I look at a 20-year-old girl or a 21-year-old girl, I'm like, you're a fucking child, but like when I was 18 and I was talking to a 21-year-old, I was like, oh my gosh, she's 21. It's just like, it's so crazy ideas we have about what it means to be at a certain age, or who a person is just because they can get into a club. You know what I mean? Like, right. It's so wild. But I do think, though, something that was still very apparent was the performative aspect of like, oh, now I have these skills. So like when I was younger and I started coming into myself, like it was more of just like my personality and my wittiness or humor, like my quote unquote natural game that was able to get me, with women. Versus now, I was like, oh, I have a skill. You know what I mean? I have like my smart skill, my intelligence skill. I have my ability to, create these wowful social experiences because I don't have fear about doing certain things, or it was my spiritual, skill of like, bringing up these esoteric topics that would get girls thinking, and I'm literally doing like levels of like psychological warfare in the sense of like getting them to tell me something vulnerable, getting them to tell me something vulnerable that's happened in their life so that they feel that there's a closer connection. And mind you, I wasn't Machiavellian. I wasn't like thinking this consciously of like, oh, I'm going to get her to tell me something vulnerable so that she now falls in love with me. But it was more of like, because this was the things I was learning, and because it was what I know was opening me up, it was just like this thing that I started doing with girls and saw that it was it would create a reaction, so that I would do more and more of it, but the sarcasm was still very strong. the give and take, you know, playing the game, you know, literally playing the game, not getting a text and not responding, you know, for 3-4 hours, you know,
or 3 or 4 days.
literally, or 3 or 4 sometimes, right? Like, or like just not responding at all, waiting until I see her tomorrow, you know, like,
so silly.
like, so even though I wanted to, even if I wanted to respond, you know, but on the flip side of that, and this is kind of when I got a little bit older, was if I did find myself really interested in a girl, I gave her all the time in the world. You know what I mean? And maybe she did too, but that doesn't mean that that was healthy either. You know what I mean? I would become obsessive, you know, not obsessive. I wasn't not obsessive, but it was more of like, I would become so interested, so enamored by a woman that it was like, oh yeah, of course we're going to talk until 3 a.m. You know, and like, of course we're going to do that. Or, you know, of course we're going to spend every weekend together, you know, or whatever the fuck, you know, whatever it was. And especially if I liked a girl, I would draw these fantasies about what it was going to be like to be with her and to create a life with her and do all these things with her. And really just take at face value the first couple interactions that I would have with a woman that I liked physically and, you know, internally, and over expand it. And the last thing I'll say about that is, and this bleeds into what was happening with, like you said, how you do anything is how you do everything, is with what I would do this in intimate relationships with partners, and I would start doing this with people I ran into. So it's like, when I was in high school, and after I ended that relationship and started really getting into personal development, I actually lost a lot of friends because they weren't into this stuff, you know. They didn't know what the fuck I was talking about, you know, and I wasn't really into what they were doing anymore. You know, it was kind of boring me, or it felt wrong, or it just felt draining. So I was still hanging out with guys, like I was still hanging out with friends, but the roles kind of switched, where it was like, but still kind of stayed the same to some extent, but the way it showed up switched. So it went from like, oh wow, look at all these cool people, I want to be like them, or I want them to accept me, to like, now I went into teacher mode, and I was like, man, like, wow, look at this guy, I just want him to be doing what the fuck I'm doing, or I want him to wake up, you know, I want him to get his shit together. So, you know, even though all these ideas I had were half-assed because I wasn't necessarily implementing all of them, I was just armchair philosophy guy, you know. And so now it was like I was going into relationships to save people, you know, instead of like actually sharing my truth with them and them sharing their truth with me. It was this whole ego of, I'm this person who's educating themselves. So, you know, I'm here to teach you something because obviously you don't know what the fuck's going on, you know, but I'm still there spending time with them. And that was what's happening when I would meet these girls, was going into teacher mode. And that shit lasted up until very recently, you know, and it's still something that I'm working through, but a lot of those things I was able to let go of. So definitely, you know, on both sides, I would say the strongest thing for platonic relationships was letting go of a lot of people, but the ones who stayed, it was like, I don't like what you're doing, I'm no longer interested in what you're doing, but I don't want to be alone, so I'm going to spend my time with you and try to convert you into Jesseism, you know. So yeah, so that's where that was.
Right.
So let's bring this baby up to speed to today.
Yes, sir. And I think what I like to say today, and this, funny enough, this is like on my walk earlier, it came up. It's like, I'm at a point in my intimate relationship, we are at a point, because we expressed this to each other the other day, where we're like, fuck, like we're building the road as we're walking it, because we don't have any other peers, friends, or even family members that have been together as long as we have. So, or even our parents, like with their partners, right? Like they haven't been together with
Mm,
their partners for that instance, and we don't have friends that haven't been together for as long as we have. So we're literally building the ship while it's rowing, to whatever the
mm,
destination is. And it's scary and exciting at the same time because we get to be, and again, I always bring up our mushroom trip that we took like years ago, but that was what that was the underlying message the whole time was like, you're a guide, you're a teacher, and you're going to be the one to do things first, and people will go to you for the answers. And that's your reasoning for being here. Mushrooms, like they don't fucking play games. Like they'll play games with you for a little, but when they hit you with the truth, they hit you with the truth really hard. And it was just like, it was one of those like, oh, like moments, and I was just like, fuck, like, and it's why, like, I've probably read over 50 books on relationships, and like being like, okay,
mm,
what's something where we're not going to do that's traditional? Okay, we're not going to get married and add the government in, at least right now. That could change in the next 10 years, right?
mm,
We're not, we want to have a celebration, but we don't want to do it your typical way where you have to spend a certain amount. She's not into getting a diamond ring because that's all marketing bullshit. So if you believe that getting a
mm,
diamond ring represents how much you love a person, it's all a lie. Thank you by the diamond or company
mm,
and a bunch of other companies, right? So so it's like, how can we start breaking these paradigms that have existed for countless generations now? That's not working anymore. Do we want the American dream life? White picket fence house,
mm,
2 dogs, 1.5 kids, whatever it fucking looks like.
mm.
No, we don't. Like we don't want that. Yeah, we want kids. How many? We don't know. Right now, we're like we're okay with one. Like one is good enough. Um, but that's how I go into it. But the best part is just being like, we're not perfect. We're only human. And I get to come into the relationship every day saying, like, I'm choosing to be here, right? Like, I'm choosing to be here consciously. The reason that I'm being here is, I mean, there's many reasons for it. And I won't go that in this podcast because we'll be here for the rest of the night. But
Forever.
um and it definitely shows in the other ways because I know what to spend our time on as as the masculine person in our relationship. I know what we need to spend time on, and I know what's a waste of time, and that bleeds into my platonic friendships, my relationships with my family members. There are things that we could talk about, and there are things where I would just be like, we're not talking about this, and I'm done, like, because this doesn't belong in this. We're beyond this. Like, we're not
Mm,
children anymore, right? And it's funny when we're looking ahead, and now we're able to watch things and see how people act on TV shows, or see how people act in these reality TV shows. Guilty pleasure is like things like The Circle. I love that fucking show. It's horrible for you, but I love that fucking show, for
oh,
instance.
fucking A.
But you're like looking at, and no judgment, like everyone's on their journey, and you're like, oh, like you don't, I can see the trauma, or I can see the way you're showing
Mm,
up. I can see the character you're playing. You're not tricking me anymore, right? Like I love how Paul Check always talks about like television, right? Television, like he always breaks it up,
mhm,
and I'm like, okay, like that's not hypnotizing me anymore. And also, like,
yeah.
what you learn for relationships from TV is not affecting us anymore. Because me and Karina, when we watch those movies like romantic comedies and all this stuff, we know how much of it is bullshit, which is usually like 95%. And there's that
Yeah.
one sliver that's like, oh, that's actually pretty true, or like, oh, that's actually pretty good. Like one of my favorite romance comedies is, I think it's called 300 Days of Summer. I love that
Mm,
movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I love it because it's so true to like what people
mm,
go through in life. You know what I mean? And like how there's sometimes not a happy ending. Like
yeah.
things like that, and we get to
It's actually
discuss.
funny. It's actually funny you bring that up. I just want to add this in here while we're here, which is like, I remember especially since I've been out of a relationship, because when I was with my last girlfriend, we would watch movies and shows together, but in my own time, it's not really something
I know.
find interest in. But I remember the other night I was like, oh, let me get wild and turn on a movie. Let me do something by it and turn on a movie. And I remember I go on Netflix and I'm sitting there for like 15 minutes and I can't choose anything. And it's because like literally there's nothing that interests me, right. because exactly what you're saying. It's like you can't, like, I know how much bullshit goes into all of this,
right,
that it cannot impede my existence. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So I ended up watching the Tiger Woods documentary, which
epic.
is
amazing.
But no, but I went into it being like, oh, I want to watch like a comedy or like something like that. I used to love watching romantic comedies, but now I'm just sitting there and just being like,
nope,
I'm bored. Like there's nothing, there's just nothing here for me to indulge in.
Exactly.
So,
all right. So where you at, Jesse? Where you been? Where does this bring you? This conversation?
Well, did you feel like you finished? You were complete in what you.
I love how you bring that next level language.
Because I interjected with my Netflix story.
Yeah, I mean, the last thing that I was gonna say is just like, with everything that's happening, comes down to the values and like what I'm willing to spend my time on, what I'm not willing to spend my time on. And that's part of a practice that I'm trying to implement, because I know once I have a child, there will literally be no more time. Like, you know what I mean? And I was like, how can I prepare to be that father to make sure that like shit that doesn't, no, I don't want this shit. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not dealing with this. And I'm only gonna, have my handful of friends that are growing as fast as I'm growing, have my partner, have, certain relationships that are networking opportunities where we support one another to make sure that we're leveling up as well. But at the end of the day, we all want to be on the same level. But how do you do that? Well, you all making sure that y'all leveling. That's what I love. Like, we get to come on this podcast, for instance, as friends, right? Bringing that, how you do one thing, how you do everything. And because we're just doing the work on our own, we get to bring that here and be like, this is what's been coming up lately.
Yeah.
And then folks don't know that we talk outside of the podcast
for hours.
You know what I mean? Like, because we're doing the work. It's not the same thing as back in the day when we were unconscious, where it was like we were going out drinking to pick up girls. Like, that was honestly what I did for so many fucking years. And now it's like, I don't really like drinking anymore, or I'm not going out to pick up girls. I'm happy with what I got. I have a great relationship. Every time I hear single people stories, I'm like, like, I'm like, I don't know if I want to deal with that. You know what I mean? I'm tired. Like, I dealt with that before, and I don't think I want to be in that situation again. So like all these things come up for me, respect to you. I know you're recently single and you're currently going through these things. But even sometimes you tell me things that makes me like not cringe, but it makes me like, oh, that's so scary. Like, I wouldn't want to be in that situation. I love you.
Well, I think it definitely becomes tougher. I think it becomes tougher when you are in conscious pursuit,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when I first became single, I was telling you the hoorah stories, but those
stories.
But those quickly faded away because I was like aware, and it was like, I can't stay here. Like, this is fun, but I can't stay in this place because it's not true, and then I made some radical fucking changes to my existence. So, as
listen to our episode on meat, honey, and no more sex, and you will know why.
Yes, exactly.
If you haven't,
exactly. Well, I'll bring it up here for a moment, but so for me, man, in both scenarios, with people. Well, one to bring, to address people first is San Diego,
Oof.
because that changed everything. You know what I mean? Like, and to be honest, like I was already on the trajectory. Really, I would say where it started was, shout out to Mustafa. If you're listening to this, buddy, I love you. He was really the first guy, you know, we didn't talk in we went to high school together, but we didn't talk at all. But we both, coming out of high school, we saw each other one day. We ended up taking kickboxing classes together. And from kickboxing, we actually both went into Amway together. Like I went in first and he was my first sign up. And, and that was like, we were just rolling. And that was where we really got into like this was the first time I had a friend who was interested in what I was interested in when it came to personal development. Like, bro, I'll never forget, because I bought Ty Lopez's actually I didn't buy it, they gave it to me.
I bought it too. Well, no, I paid $5 for it.
You paid $5 for it?
That's when he first came out with it. $5.
Oh, that's crazy. They gave me that shit for free. They were so kind. They gave me that shit for free because I was just like, yo, I'm fucking 18. I'm broke. Like, I'll do whatever. Like, can I work? They're like, we'll give it to you. Just as, just promise that you're going to use it. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to use it. And I did. I should probably go back because that shit had really good information. No lie.
I have my notes
67
somewhere.
steps. 67 steps is like legit. I learned a lot of shit from that. But I remember giving that to Mustafa and just being like, yo, here's my login. Like, just check this out. And I remember he called me and like when it clicked for him, because he wasn't really into personal, like he wasn't really into personal development in this way before. But I remember he called me after like his first few videos and was like, bro, I don't know what the fuck. Like, I don't know what this is, but this is changing my life. Like, he was just so ecstatic. And I was like, yes, there are people who understand me. Like, it was so crazy. It was so crazy. Like, it was so gratifying that I had a friend who was ready to like explore themselves in this way. And bro, like, we talk about spending time together. Like, we used to go to this place in our neighborhood where it was by the water, and we would walk for hours, because we were kids, but we would walk for hours talking about our dreams, our hopes, our desires, what the fuck we're working on, like our problems, our issues, how we're working through our personal development, like all this shit. We were so invested. And so having that relationship really set the standard for me, where at that point it was like I was still only going out to hang out with other dudes to meet women. Like you said, like it was just like, oh, this guy's going to a party, he's inviting me out, let's go to this party and do this thing. You know what I mean? And it really wasn't, that was just the main narrative until Next Level, where I met you, I met Eddie, and Mustafa was there. And that was when, and like you guys were in New York. So that was when it was like, I was really starting to build, good relationships with people locally, because we were already talking about this stuff and on the same page of this stuff. I had met a few friends through gaming that were, even though they were gaming, they were also into personal development. I actually saw one of the guys today who I hadn't seen in like 3 years, 4 years, since we last, like, probably saw each other, but we used to game like 6 years ago when I was like 18, and I saw him today, and it's been, and he's grown as I've grown, and it was just beautiful, so it's like, I started to have these relationships because I was in the communities and interested in this stuff, and people were, like-minded people attract like-minded people. But even, with you, or with I would say, other than Mustafa, because we just had so much time together, with other guys who were into personal development, it was still like, it was still mixy, you know, because it was like we would talk about personal development, but then we'd also talk about all the bullshit, you know what I mean? And it was still this like, there was no sense of real brotherhood or camaraderie or like, yo, we're in this shit. Like, why the fuck are we here? Why are we together? Why are we investing time into one another? It was just like, yo, we're both lone wolfing it on our paths and just coming together to talk about our lone wolf paths. You know what I mean? And that was really where it would end. And then when I went to California, that changed because, you know, I called you at the end of it, breaking down, just ripped to shreds, because I had recognized like how much this lone wolf mentality broke me to pieces. And a lot of the issues I was facing wasn't because, you know, I was this depressed person or I was this anxious person. Those were byproducts of my loneliness. Those were byproducts of my lack of community, my lack of being around people who I felt really connected to and felt seen with and felt, you know, like I had, you know, of course I had my girlfriend at the time, and we had our connection, but outside of that, it wasn't really like that level of like depth. And when I say that level of depth, it was for me. Like I wasn't creating that level of depth with others. You know, I was very still attached to this outside version of myself that I wanted others to see, as far as like, I got all my shit together, you know, I got it all figured out, you know, I'm bettering myself, blah, blah, blah. And then behind closed doors, I'm like hurting myself and just, you know, having these really dark, malicious thoughts onto myself. But externally, I'm like, yeah, I'm the personal development, you know, psychedelics guy. I got it all. I was good, you know. And that experience in San Diego broke me to my knees. And I swore that when I came back to New York, that I was going to commit to community, that I was going to build community and really become intentional about creating strong relationships with others. And that's exactly what I did, you know. So when I came back, you know, we right away started building a men's group. And that was really cool because I was just like, I know the type of men I want to surround myself with. I know the type of man I want to show up as for others. And I'm ready to be around other strong men. And I think that was something that I struggled with for a long time, which was developing relationships with other strong men, you know, who had their own way in life and, you know, brought their own, you know, like when I say strong mean, I mean like being vulnerable of my shortcomings in front of other strong men, you know what I mean? And you know, me and you were bound because we had we met through an emotional intelligence training. We met through vulnerability. So it was different, you know, it was like we were already there because we had this experience together.
Right.
So, but to meet people off the jump, you know, it was a little more intimidating. And then also sticking to it, meaning like really committing to showing up, you know, in these relationships with these guys and not just passing them off because, you know, things didn't work out the way I necessarily wanted them to, you know, or things weren't going according to my desire, my plan of how things should be, you know, that sense of control that I've talked about. It was at this point where it was mercy in the sense of like, nah, man, like community is about growth and building and understanding one another and really taking the time to allow that to happen and really investing your time and energy into others, not because you're looking to gain something out of it, you know, short term, but the long-term satisfaction of like having good relationships with others. And that started to change me in a major way. And and now it's gone to the point where it's like, I've become selective of who I'm going to allow myself to spend time with. And if I feel like you aren't ready to, it's not that you have to be on my level, But if you're not ready to explore yourself and and be willing to show yourself and be willing to see me, then I cannot put the time and energy into this relationship, because it's taking away from the relationships that I can be investing in that are already ready to move forward in that way. And when I do see someone who is open and who is ready, I'm ready to invest in them. You know what I mean? Like, I met a guy at my gym who was just like, kept asking me these questions about how to do certain things in the gym. And I was like, yo, why don't you just meet me at 6 a.m.? Meet me at 6 a.m. and train with me, And I didn't make a big fuss about it. I didn't overextend myself. I was just like, meet me in the gym. And he met me every fucking day, and now we train, now we train together. And I don't ask, I'm certified. This is all shit that I've been trained to learn and how to execute on. And I don't charge a fucking penny. I don't do anything, because I'm like, this guy wants it. This guy wants it. He wants to grow. He's willing to offer himself as someone who's like, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm willing to learn. But also he brings good energy. He's good vibes. He's smiling. He's happy. He's not bitching and moaning. I mean, maybe he is a little bit, but not really. He's not like complaining about his situation. He's just like figuring it out. And so it's stuff like that where in the past it was like, what do I get? What do I get out of this exchange? Versus now it's like, if I see you, I fucking see you, and we're gonna rock. And where that translates with women now, being not masturbating for what was it, February, March, April, May, June, coming into July, almost 6 months.
Almost 6 months. Woo!
Woo!
Celebration, bro.
Celebration, bro. Not having sex for almost April, May, for almost 3 months. And committing for another 9 months of not having any sex. Nothing. Is really started to change me. And at first it was like the big breakthroughs that were happening. Well, first I just want to, before I begin to that, I want to address like one of the biggest changes that I learned from my most previous relationship was to not make false promises. To not make promises that I don't know if I can keep. Because one of my biggest pains about that relationship was all the promises I made around marriage, family, what I'll be able to create for our future, blah, 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 blah. And not actually doing those things because the relationship is no longer, what was what was good for me, and I would also say probably wasn't good for her, at that point. And just to know that I made all these promises that didn't happen, it still to this day, like even now, like it makes me emotional, because I'm like, I don't ever want to do that again. I don't ever want to create such strong promises that I can't follow through on. So, and I did that for years. I did that with people in general, as like where I would say something that I'm going to do something, I'm going to accomplish something to make this thing happen. I'm going to commit all this energy to this thing, and it falls through, and it's like, there was no sense of regret or embarrassment until this time. And this time really made me realize, like, yo, you don't know what the fuck is going to happen. You don't know how these things play out, so until you're there and you actually make the marriage commitment or you have the child, don't fucking say all this shit because it sounds nice and it makes you feel good, but ultimately it can be super painful in the end. And that would be a lesson to, like, I hope everyone who is similar to me and has done shit like that, I hope you stop, because it hurts you so much in the end, you know? And then, so what, going back to now, the biggest things I've been learning through this process of letting go of masturbation, letting go of pornography, and letting go of sex, is the first things that happened was realizing that, like, oh, if the sex isn't there, do I really want to spend time with this person? You know, because there isn't that quote unquote reward part of it. And so for me, it was like starting to really discern around what type of women I actually find interesting as people, as souls, versus as objects for sexual pleasure, you know, or like, you know, emotional pleasure, in the sense of, like, you know, the give and take of the sensual, you know, tension leading up to this explosive point when we actually do it. You know, all that whole game of it not being there, you know, would I actually want to spend time with this person as a person? So creating the discretion there. And now where it's come to, and this is still something that, you know, we just talked about this the other day, so I'm not gonna spew it all out because it's still something I'm working through. But moving away from that being the teacher role and finding myself constantly wanting to show who I am by what I know and what I can offer intellectually or spiritually or, you know, cognitively, and now wanting to spend time with women who can meet me in the middle, where I feel like there's a genuine exchange of energy and value and support and consideration and thoughts and curiosity, and a sense of appreciation for one another, that now it's like even more of a feeling of, okay, how do I need to slow this down even more? How do I slow down even more? How do I become even more discerning around the women I spend my time with? How do I create more intention, you know, actively with this person every step of the way, so it's true and it's real and it's, and not to say it's perfect, like, not to say I'm learning this right now. I don't know how the fuck to do this, but I'm learning it right now as we speak. And what I would say is the biggest trajectory that has been overall in my relationships, you know, my romantic relationships, is slowing it the fuck down. You know, like slowing it the fuck down and getting to the root of both of us to see if those roots are compatible, so that we can grow a beautiful tree together, before, you know, instead of like meeting at our branches and fucking snapping off and falling off with one of them because we didn't check if our roots were good. You know what I mean? So, and then for both, I would say the biggest thing is the intention. Like, now it's like, with anyone who comes into my life, why are you in my life? Why are we having this exchange? How do I feel when I'm with you? How do I feel when I'm not with you? How are we serving each other? You know, how are we uplifting each other? What are the words you're using? You know, how are the words you're saying affecting me? How are the words I'm saying affecting you? Do we hear each other? Are we nodding at each other because what we're saying makes sense? You know, is it easy? Is it hard? Like, all these things, you know, becoming so important, to actually jumping into a relationship, because once it's there, it's like, oh, now we are going to consciously fucking create this beautiful amoeba of love and joy and experiences. And it's like, now you're my boy or now you're my girl, and we're rocking out because now we're this, you know, while at the same time also being like, and if not, then that's cool too. And I'll see you on the other side. Much love, you know? So that's that.
Aho.
That has been the evolution, brother. Aho.
The evolution, and guess what, folks? It continues, because as
It
you said
continues.
at the beginning, 10 years from now, it could look completely different. And that's the beauty of life, especially when you're doing this work, is like you just grow. You know, we're both, I feel like, in a place where we're building the road as we're walking it, like, because it's very minimal people, at least I haven't met yet, who are doing these things, you know? So we're together on that road, just building it as we go. And the lessons and everything that are going to come from that are going to be
Absolutely
solid, ready for the next conscious evolution in humanity.
Absolutely, brother. We are ready. These kids, bro, they don't know how good they're gonna have it.
Word. Word. Seriously.
Oh man. But at the same time, they're responsible, they're gonna be partly responsible for saving this world. So there's give and take. So
yes. All right.
we learned this shit. Already becoming adults. They're gonna come out the womb with this embedded into them. You know what I mean? So it's gonna be different. It's gonna be different.
Don't let that scare you.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Yeah. I want the next generation to be better than us. I want
100%. I mean, that's what life is, right? Like,
yeah,
the forebears take that and it's just like, I'm gonna do this even better than you did.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still gonna be better than all of them. No, I'm just fucking around. But
for sure.
All right, close this baby out.
Part 1 is done. As you are aware, this is going to be a 4-part series, so we're going to come back with the next one. What is it going to be? We don't know until we do it. So tune in, stay close. I hope you enjoy, y'all. Please, subscribe if you haven't already, if you enjoyed this conversation. Obviously, if you're at the end of this, you definitely enjoyed the conversation. So please subscribe, share it with a friend. Enjoying the consciousness evolution that we're all going through technically, and this will just help you find ways to do it yourselves. And reach out to us if you have any questions, folks.
That's right. Thank you all for tuning in. Peace.